In the town of Elmsworth, the morning light always seemed softer in early spring. The air still carried a chill, but the sun found its way between rows of modest houses, touching the edges of cracked mailboxes and weathered porches. It was the kind of town where people waved without names, where the grocery store cashier had known everyone's parents, and where silence traveled faster than news. On Staple Avenue, halfway down the hill, stood an old two-story house divided into 4 small apartments. The paint was peeling. The roof sagged a little near the chimney. But to Jasmine Carter it was home. She was 32, a single mother with a quiet grace that came from years of learning not to ask for much. Her son, Eli, was 7, bright-eyed, curious, with a smile that could melt the ice off a stranger's heart. They'd moved in a year earlier, after Jasmine's divorce, when money was tight and options were thinner. That morning, Jasmine woke early for work. She cleaned rooms at a local motel on the highway, an unglamorous job that kept her and Eli afloat. She packed his school lunch, helped him tie his sneakers, and kissed his forehead before they left for the bus stop. The routine was ordinary, almost peaceful, until she saw the paper on her door. A white sheet, taped crookedly, flapping in the breeze. The red letters at the top said "Notice to vacate." Her hands froze. The edges of the paper trembled in her grasp as she read the words beneath. "You are hereby given 14 days to vacate the premises for violation of lease agreement. Signed, Richard Ramsey, property owner." She blinked hard, as if the words might rearrange themselves. She hadn't missed a payment. She kept the apartment clean. She was polite to everyone. What violation? Jasmine stood there for a moment too long, the paper fluttering softly in her hand. Eli tugged her sleeve. "Mom, are we in trouble?" She forced a smile. "No, baby. It's just a mistake. I'll fix it." But deep down, she felt the cold bloom of fear, the kind that starts small and spreads fast. Richard Ramsey, the landlord, was a man in his late 50s. He drove a rust-red pickup, wore baseball caps with faded logos, and had a habit of talking down to people without realizing he was doing it. He owned several small rental units around town, each one older than the last. To some tenants, he was merely difficult. To others, especially the ones who didn't look like him, he was something worse. When Jasmine called him that afternoon, her voice calm but shaking slightly, he didn't even let her finish explaining. "I don't have to explain myself," he said. "Lease violations are grounds for termination. You'll have to leave." "What violation? I haven't broken anything in the lease." He cut her off. "Noise complaints, that's one. And I saw that car of yours parked on the grass again last week. Not allowed." "My car? I parked it there once because the street was blocked. That was 2 months ago." "Doesn't matter. Look, it's my property, Miss Carter. I don't have time for arguments. You've got 2 weeks. She could hear the faint sound of a television in the background. Some talk show, laughter filling the silence that followed his words. Then a click. The line went dead. She stared at her phone, feeling something heavy rise inside her. Not just anger, but humiliation. That quiet, invisible kind that eats away at your chest when someone treats you like you don't belong. The next few days blurred together. Jasmine went to work, dropped Eli at school, came home to the same piece of paper still taped to the door. She called tenants' rights hotlines, emailed housing agencies, but got the same answer over and over. If there's a claimed violation, the landlord can issue notice. You can contest it in court, but that takes time. Time she didn't have. Money she didn't have. On the 5th day, she came home to find Richard Ramsey standing in the yard, arms crossed, watching a handyman remove her nameplate from the mailbox. She walked up slowly. "Mr. Ramsey, please, just give me a week. I've got nowhere else to go yet." "My son." He cut her off again. "Should have thought of that before you broke the lease." "I didn't break anything." He smirked. "That's not what I've been told. Maybe this neighborhood's not the right fit for certain folks, anyway." The words hit harder than he intended, though maybe that was the point. Jasmine's eyes burned, but she didn't speak. She turned, walked back inside, and shut the door quietly behind her. That night, after Eli fell asleep, Jasmine sat at the kitchen table. A single lamp glowed beside a stack of unpaid bills and a coffee cup gone cold. She stared at the eviction notice again. She wanted to cry, but she couldn't. She was tired of crying. Instead, she opened her laptop and typed, "How to fight eviction in small claims court." That's when she found the name Laura Benjamin, a local attorney specializing in tenant advocacy. Her office was just 3 blocks from downtown. The reviews spoke of compassion, fairness, and a willingness to take cases others ignored. The next morning, Jasmine walked into Laura's office with trembling hands and a manila folder of lease documents. The place smelled like coffee and old paper. Behind a desk scattered with files sat a woman in her early 40s. Brown hair tied neatly, eyes warm but alert. "Hi," Jasmine said softly. "I need help. I'm being evicted, and I don't know why." Laura motioned for her to sit. "Tell me everything." The meeting lasted almost 2 hours. Jasmine explained everything, the notice, the calls, the comments. Laura listened carefully, taking notes in blue ink, occasionally glancing up with that calm, deliberate look lawyers have when they're already connecting dots. "Do you have a copy of your lease?" Jasmine handed it over. Laura skimmed the pages, her eyes narrowing slightly. Clause 4C, tenant parking. Nothing about grass parking being a violation unless it causes damage. She paused. "And noise complaints? Did he show you any written notice?" "No. He just said people complained." Laura looked up. "Did anyone else get a notice?" Jasmine shook her head. "Only me." The room was quiet for a moment. Laura leaned back in her chair, the faintest sigh escaping her lips. "You said something about certain folks?" Jasmine nodded. Laura set her pen down. "Okay, then we'll handle this differently." Over the next week, Laura filed a response to the eviction, forcing a court hearing. That alone gave Jasmine more time. Enough for Eli to finish his school term without disruption. Word spread quietly among the tenants. Some whispered that Richard Ramsey had done this before, mostly to single mothers, immigrants, and anyone who couldn't afford to fight back. No one had ever challenged him. Until now. The hearing took place on a gray morning in early May. The courthouse was small, the benches worn. Jasmine sat at the front with Laura beside her, heart pounding. Richard arrived late, wearing a leather jacket and a smug half-smile. He didn't bring a lawyer, just a folder of loosely stapled papers. When the judge asked about the alleged violations, Richard stumbled through his explanation. She parked on the lawn, made noise. Tenants said she had people over late. Laura stood smoothly. "Your Honor, may I ask who filed those complaints?" He hesitated. "Don't remember their names." "So, no written complaints?" "No." Laura opened her folder. "We have affidavits from the 3 other tenants, all stating that Miss Carter has never caused noise disturbances, and that no one recalls any issue with parking. In fact," she held up a photo, "this is the lawn area, gravel, not grass, and the tire marks he mentioned." She paused, letting the image settle. "From his own truck." A murmur spread across the small courtroom. The judge glanced toward Richard. "Mr. Ramsey, this seems more like personal dissatisfaction than a legitimate violation." Richard's face tightened. "She doesn't belong here, okay? She doesn't fit in with the others. I've got a right to decide who lives on my property." The judge's voice dropped. "That's enough, Mr. Ramsey. The court finds no legal basis for eviction. Case dismissed." Outside the courthouse, Jasmine stood silent for a moment, stunned. The air felt lighter, almost unreal. Laura smiled gently. "You're safe for now. He can't evict you without cause." Tears welled in Jasmine's eyes. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." Laura shook her head. "Just keep your receipts. And if he tries anything again, call me." They parted ways, not knowing that this wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed. 2 weeks later, Richard Ramsey put the building up for sale. He claimed it was too much hassle, that tenants these days lacked respect. But deep down, his pride had taken a hit. He'd lost to someone he believed couldn't possibly stand up to him. Within a month, the for sale sign came down. A new owner had purchased the property outright, a local investment group looking to renovate and raise rents. Jasmine received notice that she could stay until the end of her lease, but then the building would undergo major upgrades. Another polite way of saying, "You'll have to leave anyway." She sighed, folded the letter, and began packing slowly, one box at a time. By August, the apartment stood empty again. A month later, a moving truck pulled up in front of 1428 Staple Avenue. The neighbors watched as new furniture came in, bookshelves, framed art, and boxes labeled case files, year 2020. The new tenant was a woman with calm eyes and a brown leather briefcase. Her name was Laura Benjamin. When Richard Ramsey came by to hand over the keys, unaware of who the management company had approved, he paused on the porch, squinting. She smiled politely. "Mr. Ramsey, I believe we've met." His face drained of color. You're the lawyer." "That's right," she said softly. "And your former tenant was my client." He stood there for a long, awkward moment, words failing him. Laura took the keys, thanked him, and stepped inside. The same walls that had once held Jasmine's laughter and fear now held a quiet kind of justice. Laura set her briefcase on the counter, looked around the small apartment, and whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "This one's for you, Jasmine." Outside, the wind carried the sound of children playing down the block, one of them laughing in a voice that could have been Eli's. And for the first time in years, the old house on Staple Avenue felt like it had forgiven something. In the weeks that followed her move to Staple Avenue, Laura Benjamin settled into the apartment with an odd mix of calm and disquiet. The rooms were small but full of light. The morning sun passed through thin curtains and fell across the same patch of floor where, months before, Jasmine Carter had once stood, clutching an eviction notice. Laura kept the walls bare for a while. She told herself she was too busy to decorate, but in truth, she wanted to feel the echoes first, to understand what this space had held before she came. She had never been the type to believe in energy or memory, but something lingered here, a softness, a grief, a resilience that wasn't hers but that she could feel. Each morning, she made coffee and sat by the window overlooking the quiet street. Neighbors walked their dogs. School buses hissed at the curb. The same life went on. But every time she glanced at the doorframe, she remembered the photo Jasmine had shown her during their first meeting. Eli sitting on the floor, smiling with missing teeth, holding a Lego spaceship. They had built that right here, on this same floor. And now, Laura's law book sat where that little boy once played. Laura Benjamin had not planned on staying in Elmsworth forever. She had come back reluctantly after her mother's passing. The house she grew up in was only a few miles away, and though she could have sold it, something in her resisted. Maybe guilt, maybe duty. She had left Elmsworth 15 years ago. The same week her father's factory job disappeared and the family home began to crumble in more ways than one. She remembered how her mother had struggled to keep the house when the landlord raised the rent without warning. They had almost lost everything that winter. Only a quiet act of mercy, a neighbor who intervened, kept them afloat. So when Jasmine walked into her office months earlier, trembling but dignified, Laura had seen something painfully familiar. Not just a client, but a reflection. That's why the case had mattered more than she let on. It wasn't only about law. It was about repair. The new management company that had bought the building was a small, faceless firm run out of a downtown office. Laura paid her rent online, never met anyone in person. Ironically, that suited her. But there was one loose end she couldn't ignore. Richard Ramsey. He had vanished from town shortly after the sale, or so people said. His truck no longer appeared in driveways. His name stopped surfacing at the diner or the hardware store. Most assumed he'd left to start over somewhere cheaper, somewhere he could still be the one in control. Yet a few weeks after moving in, Laura began receiving mail addressed to him. Not junk, but letters. Handwritten envelopes. No return addresses. One every few days. Always the same shaky handwriting. At first, she tossed them aside. But on a gray afternoon, curiosity got the better of her. She slit one open carefully. Inside was a note, short and strange. "You were right to leave. They'll come for what's owed. I saw the for sale sign go up. She looked just like her. Jay. Laura frowned. The ink had bled through in places, as if written in a hurry. Who was she? And who was Jay? She folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it away in a drawer. A few days later, she found herself driving across town to meet an old friend, Detective Carl Myers, someone she'd known since high school. They'd shared cases before. She trusted him. They met at the diner, the kind that hadn't changed since the 1980s. Vinyl booths, coffee that never cooled. "You look like you've been thinking too hard," Carl said, sliding into the seat opposite her. Laura smiled faintly. "Always. What's going on?" She told him about the letters, the timing, the building's history. Carl listened, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. After a moment, he said, "You know Ramsey's father used to own that building, right?" She shook her head. "No." "Yeah. Old man Ramsey bought it after the mill closed. People said he treated tenants like property, not people. Richard just carried on the family tradition." Laura leaned back. "You think the letters could be from one of his old tenants?" "Maybe. Or from someone who knows him. Folks like that don't leave a clean trail. They just move their bad habits somewhere else." He paused. "Why's this bugging you, though? You won the case. You helped the woman. Shouldn't that be enough?" Laura looked out the window, watching cars roll past in the drizzle. "Because winning doesn't erase what happened. It just stops it from repeating. Keep thinking about her, Jasmine. Where she went after. Whether she's okay." Carl nodded quietly. "Then find her. You've got her number, don't you?" She did, but she hadn't called. She'd wanted to give Jasmine space, to live without the shadow of the case. Yet that night, the silence felt heavier than usual. The next morning, she sent a text. "Laura. Hey Jasmine. It's Laura Benjamin. Just checking in. How are you and Eli doing?" Hours passed. Evening came. Then finally a reply. "Jasmine. Hi, Laura. We're okay. Thank you for asking. Things are better now. Laura. I'm glad. Did you find a new place?" Jasmine. "Yes. Small but cozy. Eli likes his new school." Laura. "That's wonderful. You deserve peace after everything." Jasmine. "I don't know if peace is the right word, but I'm trying." Laura hesitated, then typed. "Laura. If you ever need anything, advice, paperwork, whatever, call me." Jasmine. "I will. Thank you again." That was the last message. Simple, sincere. Yet as Laura reread it, she sensed what went unsaid. The exhaustion between the lines. Weeks turned into months. Fall crept into Elmsworth, painting the trees along Staple Avenue gold and red. Life moved forward, quietly, until one evening in late October, a new envelope appeared under Laura's door. No stamp, no handwriting this time, just a folded sheet of paper, blank on one side, typed on the other. "You think you did good, but good doesn't stay clean in this town. He's back." She read it twice, heart tightening. There was no signature, but she knew who it referred to. Richard Ramsey. That night, sleep came in fragments. She dreamed of doors closing, of voices echoing down empty hallways. She woke before dawn, her throat dry, her chest heavy with a question she couldn't shake. What if Ramsey hadn't truly left? She decided to find out. At the courthouse the next morning, she searched through public records. Deed transfers, property filings, business names. Took hours, but eventually she found something. A company name, Red Staple Rentals, LLC. Filed 2 months after Ramsey had sold the property. The listed owner? Richard Ramsey. He hadn't sold the building at all. He'd just moved it under a different name. Laura sat there, staring at the document, her pulse quickening. It wasn't just pettiness anymore. It was deception. He'd lied to avoid scrutiny, to start fresh under a shell company, and probably to buy more properties in other parts of town. For a moment, anger flickered, then resolve. She gathered the papers, drove home, and placed them neatly on her kitchen table. The same table where Jasmine had once spread out her own desperate documents. History was repeating. But this time, Laura wasn't the lawyer someone called for help. She was the one standing in the crosshairs. Over the following weeks, Laura began to notice subtle things around the building. A light left on in the basement after she'd turned it off. Footsteps in the hall late at night. Once, a man's silhouette reflected in the window across the street, watching, then turning away when she looked up. She wasn't paranoid. She had proof. One morning, she found fresh tire marks beside the driveway, the same way Jasmine had described them months earlier. The past was circling back. So she called Carl again. "Something's off," she said. "I think Ramsey's trying to scare me." Carl sighed. "You've got evidence?" "Enough to make a case. He's operating through a fake company. He's still collecting rent. And someone's leaving messages." "Okay," he said. "Don't confront him. Let me look into it first." But Laura didn't listen. It was a Saturday afternoon when she drove to the edge of town, following a lead she'd pieced together from property tax records. A small warehouse near the old rail yard, listed under Red Staple Rentals. She parked outside and waited. The lot was quiet, except for the wind rattling a loose metal sign. Through a window she saw movement. A man's figure, gray cap, familiar walk. Ramsey. He looked thinner, older, like a man who'd lost something important and refused to admit it. Laura stepped out of the car, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest. "Mr. Ramsey." He turned, startled, then frowned as recognition set in. "You, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same." He glanced around. "This is private property. Under Red Staple Rentals?" she said. "You think I wouldn't find out?" He laughed bitterly. "You lawyers, always poking around. You don't know how things work here." "Actually," she said, "I do. I grew up here. I know exactly how things work, and how people get away with them." He smirked. "You're in over your head. Maybe, but I'm not the one hiding behind a fake company to keep scamming tenants." Something dark flashed across his face. "You think you're better than me because you got a degree and a fancy title. But you're just another." "Careful," she said quietly. He stopped, lips tightening. "Do you ever think about her?" Laura asked. "Jasmine, or her son. What you did to them?" He looked away. "That's not my problem anymore." "No," she said. "It's mine now." She turned and walked back to her car, her steps calm but her pulse hammering. She didn't need to shout or threaten. She'd seen enough to act. That night, Laura filed a complaint with the county's housing authority. Within days, investigators confirmed multiple violations: false ownership records, improper eviction procedures, unlicensed property management. Ramsey's entire network began to unravel. But victory didn't feel triumphant. Felt heavy, necessary but sad. Because justice, she realized, never really made things right. It just stopped them from getting worse. One evening, weeks later, a small envelope appeared in Laura's mailbox. No name, just a child's drawing, crayons on folded paper. A house, a sun, two smiling stick figures. Beneath them, the words, "Thank you for helping my mom. Eli." Laura's eyes blurred. She set the drawing on her desk, next to a photograph of her own mother. She whispered, "We keep trying, don't we?" The walls seemed to listen. The same walls that had once held Jasmine's tears, now holding something gentler. The echo of endurance. Outside, winter approached. The wind pressed against the windows. Somewhere down the street, a child's laughter carried through the cold air, fading softly into the distance. And though the house was quiet, it no longer felt empty. Felt like it was finally breathing again. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell before Thanksgiving, layering the rooftops of Elmsworth in white silence. From her window, Laura Benjamin watched the world slow down. Cars moving carefully, footsteps vanishing into fresh drifts. Inside her apartment, warmth hummed from an old radiator, the air scented faintly with cinnamon and coffee. The drawing from Eli still hung above her desk, two stick figures smiling beneath a bright yellow sun. She looked at it often, not just as a token of gratitude, but as a reminder of why she had stayed. The case against Richard Ramsey had rippled quietly through town. There were no headlines, no dramatic courtroom scenes this time. Just paperwork, audits, and a slow unraveling of the small empire he'd built on intimidation. By December, several of his properties had been seized for unpaid taxes. Others were under investigation. No one saw him much anymore. Rumor said he'd left town again, this time for good. Yet Laura didn't feel victorious. Justice rarely felt like a victory. It was more like cleaning a wound. Necessary but painful. A week before Christmas, a letter arrived. No stamp, no sender. Just her name written in neat black ink. She hesitated before opening it. The handwriting was unfamiliar but careful, almost formal. Inside was a single page. Ms. Benjamin, I don't expect you to forgive me, and I know you probably won't respond. But I wanted to say something before I go. I lost everything. Maybe I deserved to. Maybe I always did. I used to think people were the problem, the tenants, the rules, the noise. But the problem was me. I just couldn't stand to see others build something when I couldn't. You were right about Jasmine Carter. She never did anything wrong. I told myself she did because it made it easier to hate her than to admit I was cruel. If you see her again, tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I finally learned what belonging means. Richard Ramsey. Laura read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and placed it inside a folder marked Elmsworth cases. Closed. For a long moment, she sat in silence, listening to the hum of the heater and the soft ticking of the wall clock. She thought about how strange remorse sounded when written by someone who once seemed incapable of it. But then again, people changed, sometimes too late, but they changed. 2 days later, she decided to drive out of town. Not far, just to clear her head. She followed the road past the edge of the suburbs, past the frozen lake where kids once played in summer, until she reached a small community center with a hand-painted sign, Elmsworth Outreach. It was a Saturday morning. The parking lot was full. Inside, volunteers handed out food baskets, coats, and toys for the holidays. And there, at a folding table near the entrance, was Jasmine Carter. Her hair was longer now, braided neatly. She wore a thick gray sweater and a volunteer badge. Beside her, sorting boxes of donated gifts, was Eli. Taller than Laura remembered, his laughter carrying easily through the room. For a moment, Laura just watched. The image was so different from how she'd first met them. No fear, no panic, just ordinary peace. Then Jasmine looked up and saw her. Her face lit with quiet surprise. Laura? Laura smiled, walking over. I thought that was you. You look happy. I am, Jasmine said softly. We're doing better. Got a steady job at the elementary school, and this place helps a lot of families. I thought I'd give back a little. Eli ran up, holding a toy truck. Ms. Benjamin, look what I got to wrap. Laura crouched slightly to his height. That's a good one. You're helping Santa today. Huh. He nodded proudly, then ran off again. Jasmine laughed. He's growing fast. He really is. Laura paused. I got your letter, or rather, his. It's on my wall. Her eyes softened. He wanted to thank you himself, but I think he gets shy around adults. That's okay. It means a lot to me. They stood in quiet companionship for a moment, surrounded by the sound of tape ripping and laughter echoing. Then Jasmine said, I heard about Ramsey. Is it true? Laura nodded. He's gone. Maybe for good this time. Jasmine exhaled slowly. I don't wish him harm. I just hope he finds peace somewhere. You're kinder than he ever was. Jasmine shrugged. Kindness isn't for him. It's for me. I can't carry that bitterness forever. Laura smiled faintly. You sound like my mother. As the morning went on, Laura stayed to help. She packed boxes, tied ribbons, and listened as Jasmine chatted with other volunteers. Easy, confident, at home. It struck her how much one act of courage could change a life. A year ago, Jasmine had walked into her office afraid. Now she stood tall, helping others the way no one had helped her. That night, back in her apartment, Laura sat by the same window where everything began. Snow drifted past the glass, glowing under the streetlight. She thought about the chain of events, how a cruel notice had led to a courtroom, then to a confession, then to this quiet redemption. The story wasn't perfect. It wasn't even fair. But it was true. And in that truth was a kind of grace. Weeks passed. January settled in with its gray skies and early sunsets. Life returned to rhythm. Cases, clients, quiet evenings with coffee and old books. Then, one morning, Laura woke to a knock at her door. When she opened it, no one was there. Only a white envelope taped to the wood, fluttering in the cold breeze. For a split second, her chest tightened. An echo of memory. It looked just like the one that had changed Jasmine's life. The notice to vacate. But this one was different. Inside was a single note, handwritten in a familiar scrawl. "Thank you for giving this place a new beginning." The building. She smiled, realizing it was a neighbor's joke. Someone from downstairs, maybe Mrs. Lopez or the college kid in Unit 3. Yet something about it felt symbolic, as if the house itself were acknowledging what had been restored. She left the note on the counter and went about her day, but her thoughts kept returning to it. Sometimes closure didn't arrive as a grand moment. Sometimes it was just a quiet morning when the world felt safe again. That evening, she took out the folder marked Elmsworth cases, closed. She added one final page, a short letter addressed to whoever lives here next. This apartment has seen pain but also kindness. It has witnessed injustice and the courage that pushed back. If you ever feel small here, remember that someone once stood where you stand and refused to be silent. That's what makes a home. Not walls or rent, but the courage to stay when the world tries to move you. LB. She taped it gently inside the kitchen cabinet door, where it would remain hidden until another tenant someday found it. Spring returned slowly, washing the streets clean of snow. One Saturday, Laura drove to the park on the edge of town. Families picnicked under budding trees. Children ran through the grass. Among them, she spotted Jasmine and Eli again, feeding ducks by the pond, sunlight flickering on the water around them. Laura didn't call out. She simply watched for a moment, feeling something settle in her chest. Not pride, not victory, but peace. Sometimes she thought justice wasn't a gavel or a headline. Sometimes it was just a child laughing freely where fear used to live. That night, as dusk spread across Staple Avenue, Laura returned home. She poured a glass of tea and sat by the window. The street was quiet, only the soft hum of distant traffic. Her eyes fell once more on Eli's drawing. The paper had faded slightly in the sun, but the colors still shone. The yellow sun, the small blue house, the two smiling figures. She realized, with a small ache of gratitude, that it wasn't just a picture of them. It was a picture of everyone who had ever been forced out, and everyone who had ever found the strength to begin again. Later, before bed, she walked to the door. The same door that had once carried a notice of eviction now held a small brass nameplate. L. Benjamin, attorney at law. She ran her hand lightly over the letters, feeling the cool metal beneath her fingers. Then she whispered, to no one in particular, "No more notices." Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees, carrying the scent of rain and the sound of distant laughter. And in that quiet, the house, once a symbol of cruelty, stood redeemed. No longer a place of fear, but of quiet resilience. Because sometimes poetic justice isn't loud. It's just a door that stays closed when it used to slam open. A home that holds, finally, instead of pushing away.